Across the endless stretch of the Calaris Nebula, where bright blue dust clouds danced with dying stars and space hummed with quiet storms, a soundless warning was rising. Something too ancient, too heavy, and too forbidden for most species to understand. For thousands of years, the Galactic Council enforced strict laws about weapons. No planet killers, no collapsing stars, no reality-bending devices, no machines capable of tearing holes in time. Those laws were written to keep peace, to stop empires from turning the galaxy into fire. But above every law, older than every rule, carved into red crystal in the deepest chamber of the Council, sat one line that every species whispered about but never questioned: no ship shall be built like the Terran warship Eclipse again. No one alive had seen the eclipse. No recordings existed. No holograms. No scans. The Council banned every trace of its existence. Young species believed it was only a myth, a scary story told by paranoid elders, a human exaggeration, like the old tales of deathworlders punching war beasts with bare fists. But the older races, the ones who lived through ancient wars, never laughed about the eclipse. They never spoke its name casually. Some even flinched when it was mentioned, because they remembered the last time humanity unleashed it, and they remembered how the sky changed color. How stars dimmed. How entire sectors fell silent for days. But none of those memories were shared openly. The Council buried them. The humans locked the ship away. And life moved on. Until today. In the farthest watchtower near the Calaris Nebula, a small border patrol scanned the dust storms for pirates or smugglers. A normal day. Calm. Routine. Officers joked about lunch rations. Pilots played cards to kill the boredom. Nothing ever happened out here. But then the scanners flickered. First a blink. Then a glitch. Then a power surge so strong it shut down 3 auxiliary systems at once. The technician frowned, tapping the console. Must be the nebula's magnetic dust again. But the scanner blinked again, this time with a low rumble like something massive had brushed past the ship. Everyone froze. The captain walked to the main screen. What is that? A single dot appeared. Large. Cold. Drifting. No heat signature. No communication. No ID beacon. No sign of engines. It was far bigger than any cruiser. Bigger than any dreadnought. Bigger than anything that should have been drifting silently through a nebula. The captain leaned closer, and the dot grew into a shape. A dark, smooth hull emerging from cloud and shadow. A ship older than the nebula storms that surrounded it. The patrol officers went silent, breath caught in their throats as their ship trembled. Not from a weapon, not from a shockwave, but from pure presence, as if the void itself bent around this ancient beast. The captain stepped backward, eyes wide, voice thin. That can't be. The shape grew larger, clearer, colder. The hull seemed carved from night itself. No windows, no seams. No engines glowing. Just endless black metal absorbing all light. Some kind of blue symbols pulsed slowly along its surface. Symbols that looked Terran but older, deeper, from a time before the Terran Republic existed. The patrol captain felt his heart slam in his chest. His voice cracked as he whispered the one word he hoped he would never say. Eclipse. The crew gasped. One officer stumbled to the floor. The youngest pilot covered her mouth, whispering prayers to 3 different gods at once. The captain repeated himself, louder this time, as if saying the name might help him accept the impossible sight before him. It's the eclipse. No one moved. No one blinked, because they all knew what the word meant. The eclipse was not just a ship. It was a warning, a relic from a time when humanity created weapons so strong the galaxy forced them to bury their own creations. A warship so powerful the Council banned not only the ship, not only its technology, but even the idea of it. Generations passed. Memories faded. But the law remained. The patrol captain whispered, "Why is it awake, now?" The eclipse drifted toward the border world slowly, silently, as if waking from a long sleep. No engine flares. No announcements. No power spikes. No weapons online. But its very existence weighed on the galaxy like a mountain dropped into an ocean. The patrol ship shook again. Panels crackled. Lights dimmed. Gravity warped slightly, as if the eclipse had its own gravitational field. Officers panicked, yelling as alarms triggered. System overload. Shields collapsing. We're being pulled into its wake. But the captain raised his hand. Don't fire. His voice was trembling but firm. Don't even raise our weapons. Don't provoke it. The officers stared at him. One whispered, "Can it hear us?" "It doesn't matter," he replied. "It was built to sense threats." Suddenly the patrol ship's engines died. Everything went dark. The eclipse drifted past them like a silent god, its hull glowing faint blue as if recognizing them, then dismissing them. Then, everything in the patrol ship powered back on by itself. Slowly, softly, promptly, like the eclipse was granting mercy. The crew stared in terrified silence. On Helion Prime, sensors lit up across the council hall. Alarms screamed. Energy readings spiked across 8 sectors. And in the center of the council chamber, the ancient red crystal containing the lore about the eclipse glowed, for the first time in thousands of years. Leaders froze, staring at the glowing symbol. "Impossible," someone whispered. "The ban. It only glows if the ship is awakened." The council elder's voice trembled. "Which means humanity has lost control." The hall erupted in panic. "Call Earth. Prepare fleets. Alert every system. Why haven't the humans warned us?" But before any message could be sent, a transmission appeared. Blank screen, no source, no sound, just one line written in glowing Terran script. "Do not approach the eclipse." And then the message vanished. No explanation. No voice. No request for help. Just a warning. The patrol captain on the nebula edge swallowed hard as the eclipse disappeared deeper into the storm clouds, its impossible shadow fading into the cosmic dark. One of his officers whispered, "If that thing is awake, does that mean the threat it was built for is coming back?" The captain didn't answer. He couldn't, because deep in his heart, he already knew the truth. Humans never built the eclipse for war. They built it for something far worse, and now, the forbidden ship was awake. Across the Kalaris Nebula, as the forbidden Terran warship drifted deeper into the thick blue storm clouds, every sensor on every nearby vessel blared errors, distorted signals, or outright failed. Yet the eclipse itself remained perfectly calm, moving with the soft, silent momentum of something that did not sail through space but owned it. And the patrol crew could only watch helplessly as the ancient warship glided. Further away, its hull absorbing starlight until it looked less like a vessel and more like a piece of night torn out of the universe. The patrol captain tried to steady his trembling hands as he recorded the ship's path, but every time he zoomed in, his screens blurred. Lines glitched, and readings vanished, as if the eclipse rejected the idea of being observed. "It's disrupting every scanner we have," the science officer whispered, voice thin, eyes wide with fear. "Not attacking, just erasing." The captain swallowed hard. "It's not attacking because it doesn't see us as a threat." The entire bridge fell silent at that, because the implication was terrifying. If the eclipse wanted them gone, they would already be dust. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the council crisis room was in chaos. Hologram maps flickered wildly, showing regions where long-range tracking systems had collapsed entirely. Red lines crisscrossed the nebula, each marking a moment of sensor failure. Council analysts argued rapidly, their voices growing louder with every new alert. "It's absorbing our scans. It's warping gravity fields. It's overriding our satellites. Why are the humans not responding?" The council elder slammed his staff down. "Contact the Terran Republic. Now." But when the communication channel opened, something impossible happened. A deep, cold static responded, not interference, not jamming, just a silent, heavy presence that felt like someone or something was listening but refusing to speak. The ambassador from the Vero's hive trembled, his antennae shaking. "It's not a block. It's like the line is being held by something." A technician paled. "Sir, that static, it's the eclipse. It's the ship itself answering the call." The council chamber erupted into gasps and shouts. Impossible. Ships can't answer diplomatic channels. It's AI-driven. Nothing should be able to hijack council frequency. But the truth hung in the air like a hanging blade. The eclipse wasn't following any known rules. It was ancient. It was forbidden. It was beyond modern technology. And it was awake. Meanwhile, in the Calaris Nebula, the patrol captain watched something more horrifying happen. The eclipse paused. Just stopped moving. Not a slow drift. Not a deceleration. A full, perfect stop in a region where gravity storms should have made such precision impossible. Why did it stop? One of the crew asked in a whisper. The captain zoomed the view. The blue glow on the eclipse's hull brightened slowly, like veins pulsing with energy under its skin. It's powering up, the captain said, voice cracking. But, powering up for what? Then the nebula storm around the eclipse bent inward, swirling like it was being pulled toward the ship. The storm light twisted. The gravity currents warped. The entire nebula seemed to bow to it. This isn't natural, the science officer whispered, clutching her console. It's changing the storm. No, the captain murmured. It's waking. The eclipse released a low hum, not sound through air, but a vibration that flowed through space itself. Nearby asteroids vibrated. Patrol ship panels rattled. Crew members grabbed their seats as the very structure of space trembled. And then, every weapon on the Council border fleet activated by itself. Not human weapons. Council weapons. Alien weapons. Ships from 6 species. Cannons, missiles, torpedoes, everything armed automatically. Targeting systems aligning toward the eclipse without permission. Captains screamed across open channels. We're not doing this. Weapons are firing on their own. Cut power. Shut down targeting. But nothing responded. Consoles sparked. Hulls shook. Fighters detached without pilots. The eclipse didn't fire. Didn't shield. Didn't react at all. It simply looked at them, or whatever version of looking such an ancient ship possessed. And then something happened that made the entire patrol crew stop breathing. Every weapon from every ship that fired vanished. Not exploded. Not deflected. Vanished. Missiles turned to blue dust mid-flight. Plasma bolts evaporated like mist. Rail rounds dissolved into particles of light. Nothing touched the eclipse. Nothing even reached its hull. It was as if the universe itself refused to let anything harm it. The patrol crew stared in absolute silence as the eclipse pulsed again, releasing a wave of soft blue light that washed over the attacking ships. Suddenly, every one of their weapons shut off. Systems rebooted. Power drained. Fleets that had fired involuntarily panicked, sending terrified messages across every channel. It disarmed us. Our reactors shut down. Shields offline. Weapons gone. But the eclipse still did nothing. No attack. No retaliation. No movement. It didn't need to. Its presence alone was enough to end fleets. The captain whispered, "It's not here for war." "Then what is it here for?" the science officer whispered. The captain shook his head slowly. "I don't know. But the humans didn't wake it." His eyes widened. Which means, something else did. The patrol crew turned as another alert pinged. This one from deep inside Terran territory. A single coded message, encrypted with ancient human symbols not used for thousands of years. The message was simple. Only 4 words. Do not approach eclipse. The captain stared at it. The humans know. And somewhere across the galaxy, in a place no council record had ever reached, an old Terran admiral stood before a silent, dark room filled with ancient holograms, whispering to himself with dread. It's awake, which means something worse is coming. Because humanity never built the eclipse to fight empires. They built it to fight nightmares. Across the galaxy, panic spread like fire in dry grass as the eclipse continued drifting through the Calaris Nebula, silent and unstoppable, its massive shadow cutting through stormlight like a blade slicing the sky, and every nearby species felt the same heavy pressure in their chests. The instinctive ancient fear that rises only when a creature far above your place in the universe awakens. On thousands of worlds, Citizens rushed to screens, watching shaky live broadcasts from the Border Patrol, seeing the eclipse drift with calm confidence, absorbing attacks without reacting, shutting down fleets without effort, bending nebula storms as if they were only smoke, and fear turned into pure dread when council analysts confirmed that the ship was not being controlled. Not by humans, not by AI, not by anyone. It was acting on its own. Something older than commands, older than the council, older than the galaxy's peace treaties was inside that black metal. And then, just as fear peaked, just as entire empires began preparing evacuation routes, something happened that shocked everyone watching. A Terran fleet arrived. Not a small one. Not a diplomatic escort. A full Terran Titan formation, 10 dreadnoughts, 60 cruisers, nearly 100 destroyers, all emerging from hyperspace with engines burning bright blue, forming a rigid wall between the council worlds and the drifting eclipse. The moment the first Terran ship appeared, a wave of energy pulsed across the nebula, as if the eclipse recognized the presence of its makers. But instead of attacking, instead of reacting with hostility, the eclipse paused. Its glow dimmed. Its drift slowed. It almost seemed to listen. On the bridge of the Terran flagship TNS Orion's Hand, Admiral Soren Hale stood frozen in front of the holographic projection of the eclipse. His breath was shallow, his hands trembling, his voice barely steady as he whispered, "This was never supposed to wake." Officers around him exchanged fearful glances. They had never seen their admiral afraid. Humanity feared nothing. Humanity joked during battles. Humanity even fought void beasts with insane bravery. But today, humanity was quiet. Terrifyingly quiet. The communication officer swallowed hard. "Sir, transmission from the council. They demand an explanation." Soren didn't answer. Not yet. His eyes remained locked on the eclipse's hull, on the ancient Terran runes glowing faintly across its surface. Runes so old that even humans today no longer remembered the full language. One of his officers spoke, voice shaky. "Admiral, why didn't we destroy it when the law was made? Why didn't we scrap it?" Soren exhaled slowly, heavily. "Because we couldn't." He turned to face his bridge crew, eyes dark with memories from classified Terran history no alien had ever been allowed to read. "We didn't just build the eclipse. We forged it. Out of something not from this galaxy. Something we found long ago. Something that scared even us." The crew went pale. One lieutenant whispered, "Then why did it wake now?" Soren stared back at the drifting warship, his jaw tightening. "Because the trigger for waking it is danger. Not to humans. Not to Terran space." His voice lowered. "To the galaxy." The eclipse pulsed with a deeper blue glow, each wave rippling through the nebula like a heartbeat. Once. Twice. Every pulse sent a shiver through the Terran fleet. It wasn't threatening them. It was communicating. Like a sleeping giant stirring because it smelled something on the wind. Something ancient. Something returning. On Helion Prime, the council shouted into the comms. "Terran Admiral. Respond at once. Why is the eclipse awake? What danger triggers its activation? You will answer us." But when Soren finally activated the channel, every species froze at the sound of his voice. Not angry. Not defensive. Just quiet. Heavy. Tired. "This is Terran command." Even that short sentence made diplomats lean back in fear. Humans were not loud. Not funny. Not emotionally open. Today, their voices were cold stone. "The eclipse was never a weapon for war," Soren continued. "It was built to fight one enemy. One enemy only. An enemy not seen in thousands of years." The council elder's voice shook. "What enemy?" Soren closed his eyes. "We called them the Devourers." Gasps rippled across the chamber. The Devourers, creatures believed to be myth, stories told to scare children, tales of monsters that consumed entire star systems in the ancient dark. The council elder swallowed. "Admiral, those legends are not legends," Soren interrupted. "We fought them. Alone." The entire galaxy stopped breathing. "The eclipse was our only weapon that could hold them back," Soren said. But the cost, the destruction, the consequences were so high that we sealed the ship away. Buried it under laws stronger than any treaty. We thought the devourers were gone forever. He lifted his eyes slowly, voice dropping lower. If the eclipse has awakened, his officers stiffened. Council members gripped their seats. Entire worlds leaned closer to their screens. Then the devourers are returning. A silence heavier than gravity fell across the galaxy. Children cried. Elders trembled. Scientists panicked. Even battle-hardened warriors felt their blood turn cold. The eclipse pulsed again, brighter this time, the runes across its hull flaring like warnings carved into metal by gods. It drifted forward, turning slightly toward the nebula's darkest region, the region where long-range scans had failed repeatedly. As if pointing, as if sensing something the rest of the galaxy could not. Soren whispered, barely audible, "It's searching for the threat." Then, as if answering him, the nebula shook. Not a storm. Not a ship. Not a glitch. A roar. A sound that wasn't sound. A vibration that made light bend. The patrol ship shook violently. The council feed glitched. Terran officers grabbed railing. Soren whispered, voice cracking, "No, no, not now." And the galaxy finally understood why humans, the loudest species, the bravest species, the most fearless species, had been silent for thousands of years whenever the eclipse was mentioned. Because the eclipse was not humanity's monster. It was humanity's shield. And shields only awaken when something worse comes. Across the shaking blue storms of the Kalaris Nebula, the soundless roar that rippled through space felt like a knife scraping across the bones of the universe, a vibration so deep and ancient that even machines built without fear protocols began shutting down, their systems unable to process the impossible frequency. Every ship, council, patrol, Terran, trembled under the pressure as the nebula twisted into spirals of light and shadow, the very fabric of space bending as if something massive was pushing its way into the galaxy. And in that chaos, the eclipse reacted. For the first time since waking, the ancient Terran warship ignited. Not its engines. Not its weapons. Its heart, a massive core at the center of its hull, forged from a star humans captured thousands of years ago, now glowing like a blue sun trapped inside metal. The glow spread outward in slow waves, illuminating deep runes along the hull, each symbol pulsing with old power, power older than the Council, older than Terran history, power meant for one purpose only, to fight the Devourers. Terran Admiral Soren Hale watched the runes brighten, every line of glowing blue making his stomach twist. "It's fully awake," he whispered. Officers around him stared with dry mouths and shaking hands. "Sir, is it angry?" Soren shook his head slowly, his voice barely above a breath. "Not angry. Away." The eclipse turned, slowly, gracefully, like a creature stretching its limbs after a long sleep. The storm clouds parted around it as if afraid to touch its hull. Council fleets retreated in terror, their ships scrambling to clear a path that the eclipse didn't even acknowledge. It moved with the calm authority of something that no longer recognized the galaxy as its equal. Alarms across Council worlds blared as live feeds showed the ship shifting from passive drift to awakened stance. Is it targeting us? Is it charging weapons? Will it attack? But the eclipse continued to ignore them. Its interest lay elsewhere, somewhere deeper in the nebula, where the roar had come from. On Helion Prime, the council chamber was chaos, ambassadors shouting over each other until the elder struck his staff and screamed, "Silence!" The room froze. His voice trembled. "Play the latest footage." A hologram flickered, grainy, distorted by nebula static, but clear enough to see. Behind the eclipse, behind the swirling storms, something moved. Something enormous. Something wrapped in darkness so thick that even the brightest nebula light could not penetrate it. A shadow with tendrils stretching miles. A shape that was wrong. Too fluid, too vast, too alive for space. Gasps filled the chamber. Some fainted. Some screamed. Some clutched their chest. The Devourers, someone whispered. They were real, they're coming, they are here. The hologram cut as interference swallowed the signal. Back in deep space, the Terran fleet struggled to hold formation as the nebula twisted around them. Soren gripped the railing as the Orion's hand rocked violently. "Stabilize shields," he shouted over the alarms. "Get me updated scans. I want every engine hot." Officers ran across consoles, shouting updates, gravity waves increasing. Spatial tearing rising. Something is pushing through the nebula wall. Then a new sound echoed through the bridge, a calm, emotionless voice that froze every human in place. "Eclipse lock, release." The words came not from their systems, not from their AI, not from any external source. They came from the eclipse itself. Soren's eyes widened in horror. No, not that protocol. But it was too late. Blue chains of light snapped across the eclipse's hull. Locks that had held it dormant for millennia, shattering one by one like breaking bones. The ship flared with bright energy, brighter than any star in the nebula, until even Terran sensors failed to measure the output. And then the Devourer emerged. It pushed through the nebula like a shadow swallowing the sky, its body dripping darkness that consumed starlight, its many eyes glowing like dying suns, its tendrils stretching out as if searching for something to feed on. The patrol ship crew screamed. Council watchers fainted. Even the Terran fleet shook with fear, not from the creature itself, but from the memory of fighting its kind centuries ago, when humanity nearly died. But there was one vessel that did not tremble. One warship that did not flee. One creation that had been built for this moment. The eclipse turned to face the Devourer, its hull glowing brighter, its runes burning hotter, and the pressure in space intensified as if two gods were staring at each other, neither willing to blink. The Devourer let out another silent roar, space cracking like glass around its body. And the eclipse answered. Its blue glow transformed into pure white fire. The nebula spun faster. Space shook harder. The creature recoiled. And then, for the first time in thousands of years, the eclipse spoke. Threat detected. Its voice was calm, cold, ancient. Soren stepped back, whispering to himself, "It remembers." The galaxy watched as the eclipse prepared to unleash power no modern species had ever seen. And every being, from soldiers to children to council leaders, felt the same cold truth settle into their bones. The eclipse wasn't just awake. It was ready to fight. Across the storm-filled void, as the Devourer's monstrous body pushed fully into the galaxy, its shadow stretching across thousands of kilometers like a black ocean spilling over the stars, the eclipse floated in front of it like a single, glowing blade held by an ancient warrior, silent yet unshakable, and every living being watching through screens or windows or cracked holograms felt the same primal truth rise inside them. The Devourer was hunger, a living void, a creature born from the darkness between galaxies. But the eclipse was something worse, something forged by human hands not as a weapon of war but as a final answer to extinction. The Devourer's tendrils whipped forward, each longer than a city, each dripping with cosmic corruption that made nebula gas rot into black smoke. The tendrils wrapped around the eclipse with terrifying speed, squeezing the ancient ship, twisting its hull with the strength of collapsing suns. Council fleets screamed warnings. Civilians across star systems cried. Terran officers shouted commands through static-filled channels, their voices breaking under stress. Eclipse is under attack. Those tendrils can crush moons. Admiral, what do we do? But Admiral Soren Hale stood silent, his eyes locked on the glowing ship, his heart beating painfully. We do nothing, he murmured. It was built for this. The Devourer tightened its grip, dragging the eclipse closer, pulling it toward its gaping central maw, a swirling vortex of darkness so absolute that even starlight died inside it. Entire planets had vanished into that maw in ancient history. Civilizations erased in seconds. The Devourer wanted to swallow the eclipse whole. But the ancient human warship didn't resist. It didn't fire. It didn't flee. It simply allowed itself to be pulled closer, like a predator letting its prey believe it had one. Slowly, the eclipse tilted its hull, the runes brightening into blinding blue, each burst of light sending ripples of force through the nebula, the glow growing hotter and sharper with every passing second. The Devourer's eyes flared in surprise, its tendrils trembling violently as cracks of blue-white fire spread across them where they touched the eclipse's armor. It tried to pull back. It couldn't. The eclipse whispered. Countermeasure. Unlocked. The runes snapped open like glowing wings across the hull, and in the next moment, a sphere of white flame exploded outward, not loud, not violent, but impossibly bright, a silent pulse that vaporized every tendril that had been wrapped around it. The Devourer recoiled, slamming backward into the nebula wall, its shriek shaking space itself, tearing through hyperspace layers like metal being scraped by claws. Terran ships were thrown off course. Council ships spun wildly. The nebula itself twisted into spirals of blue and black fire, like the universe was holding its breath. And the eclipse finally moved. It accelerated so fast that it blurred, streaking across the nebula like a spear thrown by a god. The warship slammed into the Devourer's chest, if a creature of void even had a chest, with such force that space rippled outward in rings. The Devourer roared, lashing out with dozens of new tendrils, each one formed from darkness so deep it seemed to devour light. But the eclipse danced through them. If earlier it moved like a drifting relic, now it moved like a predator, every shift of its hull cutting through tendrils like they were nothing but fog. The eclipse's core flared again. Energy level, optimal. Enemy containment, incomplete. Containment. A word that sent ice through the hearts of every Terran watching. The Devourer lunged forward, opening its maw wide, the vortex inside spinning faster, trying to drag the eclipse into its event horizon. Soren shouted instinctively, "Brace shields," even though he knew shields meant nothing here. The eclipse dove into the darkness. Not away from it. Not around it. Into it. The warship vanished inside the creature's maw. Terran officers screamed. Council fleets cried out. Entire worlds fell into terrified silence. We lost visual. The eclipse is gone. Admiral, what do we? But Soren raised a trembling hand. Wait. The maw shook. Cracks of blue light appeared along its edges. The Devourer roared again, louder than before, its vortex destabilizing violently, and then it happened. The maw exploded outward in a beam of white fire so bright it lit 3 star systems. A shockwave shook every ship. Alarms screamed. The Devourer's body convulsed, its darkness peeling apart as the eclipse erupted from its core, burning like a newborn star wrapped in human metal. The warship fired a beam, thin, straight, impossibly concentrated, directly into the Devourer's central eye. The creature's body twisted. Its tendrils convulsed. The beam carved through it like a sword through water, leaving glowing wounds trailing behind. The Devourer, a creature that devoured planets, that fed on star cores, that once forced ancient humanity to the edge of extinction, shrieked in agony. The eclipse circled around the wound, carving deeper, faster, each pass slicing away darkness like peeling layers from a dying sun. Terran officers stared, tears in their eyes from the blinding light, the realization hitting them like a storm. This wasn't a war, it was execution. The Devourer lashed out again, but its tendrils were slower, weaker, trembling with pain, and the eclipse moved even faster, its runes glowing white-hot as if drawing power from something beyond physics. Soren whispered, voice cracking, "It's stronger than before. This shouldn't be possible." But it was. The eclipse fired again, a final beam, wider this time, aimed at the core of the Devourer's body. The creature froze, its entire form trembling violently, cracks of white energy spreading across its massive shadow flesh. And with a final, echoing scream, the Devourer exploded. Darkness shattered. Nebula storms reversed. Light flooded the void. The Devourer, an ancient terror that once consumed a dozen civilizations, was gone. And floating alone in the glowing aftermath, untouched, unmoved, unbroken, was the eclipse. Silent, watching, waiting, and the galaxy finally understood. The eclipse wasn't a weapon humans built to win wars, that it was a weapon humans built to end horrors. Across the glowing ruins of the nebula, as the Devourer's massive shadow body dissolved into drifting ash that sparkled softly in blue stormlight, a silence fell so heavy that every living being watching felt it press against their lungs. A silence not of peace but of something unfinished, something waiting. The eclipse hovered in the center of that quiet, its runes dimming slowly like the breath of a giant catching itself after a long struggle, its hull cooling from white-hot back to deep blue, its core pulsing with slow, steady waves of light as if it were listening to the void itself. Terran Admiral Soren Hale gripped the bridge rail so hard his fingers turned white, unable to tear his eyes from the screen, watching the forbidden warship float among the fragments of its victory. Officers whispered around him, voices trembling. Is it over? Did the eclipse destroy the Devourer? Are we safe now? But Soren shook his head slowly, painfully, the truth sitting heavy in his chest. This was just a scout. The words hit the bridge like a freezing wind. Officers stopped breathing. The communication officer whispered, scout. Soren nodded, staring into the swirling nebula as if he could feel the truth rising behind the silence. The Devourers never travel alone. They test galaxies before consuming them. They send a single one first. If no strong defense responds, the swarm follows. Another officer's voice cracked. And if something strong does respond? Soren closed his eyes. They send something stronger. A chill spread through the ship. Council fleets on shared channels went silent. Even the civilians watching from 1,000 worlds paused, sensing something deeper, darker beneath the victory. Because the nebula wasn't calming. It was trembling. Nebula winds shook. Storm particles twisted. Gravity waves rippled outward like invisible footsteps approaching. The eclipse turned slightly, as if sensing something before any scanner could. Its hull brightened again. Quiet at first. Then brighter. Faster. More urgent. Sir, the sensor officer cried, hands shaking over a flickering console. Something is happening behind the nebula wall. Soren turned sharply. Show it. The hologram struggled to form through static, distortions cutting across the image. But then, between the torn remains of nebula gas, shapes appeared. Not one. Not two. Dozens. 40. 50. More. Massive silhouettes moving through dark space, twisting into view like an armada of shadows approaching the galaxy. Council delegates on Helion Prime collapsed into their chairs. Citizens screamed across worlds. Children cried as emergency sirens activated in distant cities. The Devourer that the eclipse destroyed, something that almost tore space apart, was just one of many. The swarm had awoken. One council diplomat screamed, Terrans, you must destroy them. Humans, use the eclipse. Save us. But Soren's voice remained quiet, almost broken. No one controls the eclipse. Not even us. As if responding to his words, the eclipse pulsed, hard. A shockwave rippled outward, not violent, not destructive, but searching. A scan. Not a technological one. A living one. The ancient runes along its sides glowed brighter than before, changing color, from blue to white to a deep, ominous red. Officers gasped. Sir, what does red mean? Soren whispered the answer like a man repeating a nightmare. Overload mode. The eclipse was not preparing for battle. It was preparing for something else. Something no human captain had ever dared to activate in recorded history. The ship's core expanded, its glow stretching outward, its hull opening in shifting segments like metallic petals exposing a burning star inside. The patrol crew watching from a distance fell to the floor in shock, their bodies shaking at the sheer pressure of the energy building in the eclipse. The council sensors exploded with warnings. Energy readings impossible. It's drawing power from the nebula. Shut it down. It's too much. But the eclipse did not shut down. It consumed more. And more. Its core pulsed faster. The nebula's storms bent inward toward it, pulled like water spiraling into a drain. And then the eclipse spoke again, its voice echoing across the comm channels in a cold, ancient whisper. Swarm detected. Soren froze. The voice continued. Overload recommended. A shiver ran through every human on every Terran ship. Overload mode was not meant to be used. Overload mode meant the eclipse was preparing to detonate its entire core, creating a shockwave that could collapse space around it and annihilate everything within a massive radius, including itself. The eclipse was preparing to sacrifice itself. The realization punched Soren in the chest. No, you don't have to do that, he whispered, as if the ship could hear him. "We can fight. We can stop them together." But the Eclipse had no pilot. No fear. No hesitation. It was a machine built to complete one final purpose: stop the Devourers even if it meant destroying itself. The glow reached blinding brightness. Space itself began to crack around the core like thin ice breaking under weight. The swarm of Devourers pushed closer, their shadows swallowing stars one by one. Civilians cried on planets far away. The Council begged for miracles. Terran soldiers clenched their teeth, knowing what was coming. And the Eclipse, brighter now than any sun, whispered one final message across the galaxy: protect the living. Soren's voice broke. "No. Eclipse, don't." But the forbidden human warship had already made its choice. A choice written into its metal long ago. A choice humanity hoped it would never have to make again. Across the trembling Kalaris Nebula, where storms twisted like dying serpents and gravity tore at itself in silent agony, the Eclipse hovered at the center of the chaos with its core burning like a newborn star ready to explode, its runes glowing deep red, pulsing faster and faster as if preparing for its final breath. And every living being watching, from the terrified council leaders to the smallest child on distant worlds, felt the cold truth strike their hearts. The forbidden human warship was about to sacrifice itself to stop the Devourer swarm. Admiral Soren Hale stood frozen on the bridge of the Orion's Hand, staring at the glowing monster humanity built thousands of years ago, his chest tightening with a pain he had never known, the pain of watching history repeat itself. His voice broke as he whispered, "Not again, please, not again." But the Eclipse did not care about fear, did not care about sorrow, did not care about survival. It cared only about fulfilling its last ancient protocol: destroy the enemy, even if the cost is everything. The swarm of Devourers approached in a dark wave, their massive forms twisting through the nebula like an ocean of shadows ready to spill into the galaxy, each one roaring with a soundless hunger that shook senses, flickered lights, and made every soul watching feel smaller than dust. But instead of fear, the Eclipse greeted them with a calm, growing brilliance, its core expanding dangerously, cracks forming in the space around it. Tiny fractures of shimmering light appearing as reality itself began to strain under the rising energy. Officers onboard council ships screamed as their vessels were pushed backward by shockwaves. Civilians watching through screens cried and begged for someone to stop what was coming. And in the Terran flagship, an impossible choice weighed heavily on the shoulders of the human admiral. Soren slammed his fist onto the console. "We can't let it overload. It will destroy half this sector." The engineering officer protested through tears. "Sir, we can't approach. The energy will tear us apart." Soren shook his head violently. "I don't care. That ship is Terran. We will not let it die alone." His voice cracked under the weight of memories passed down through secret Terran history. Stories of the first eclipse, stories of the nightmare war no alien had ever seen, stories of sacrifices humans swore they would never allow again. He opened every channel, his voice trembling. All Terran ships, full burn, shields to maximum, lock formation. We are stopping that overload. Across space, Terran captains, men and women hardened by battle, trained in silence, raised with stories of ancient losses, answered without hesitation. Engines roared. Shields flared. Destroyers and cruisers surged forward through collapsing space, fighting against gravity waves that tried to tear them apart. Council fleets watched in stunned awe as the humans, instead of fleeing, raced toward the exploding star at the nebula's center. "Admiral, the pressure will kill us. Admiral, we are losing hull integrity. Admiral, radiation levels are beyond safe." Soren shouted back, voice fierce with desperate determination. Better to die trying than to let it sacrifice itself. But the Eclipse seemed to sense their approach. Its core pulsed harder, its hull glowing with blinding red light, and the ship whispered across the comms in that same cold, ancient voice. "Terran vessels, retreat." Soren's throat tightened. "No, not this time." "Retreat," the Eclipse repeated. "Overload is necessary." "No!" Soren roared, slamming the console. "We lost you once. We will not lose you again." For the first time since awakening, the Eclipse paused. Just a small flicker, A brief hesitation in the endless storm of rising energy, but enough for Soren to breathe. I can reach it. He knew the eclipse wasn't alive, but it wasn't ordinary machine either. It was built from something that understood intention, something that responded to conviction. So Soren spoke, not as a commander, not as a soldier, but as a human speaking to a creation made by his ancestors. You are not alone, he whispered softly, tears gathering in his eyes. We are here. We are still here. You do not have to die to save us. His voice trembled. Let us fight with you, not after you. Across the nebula, the eclipse's core flickered, faint, light blue returning under the red, almost like a heartbeat remembering its rhythm. Then the devourer swarm roared louder, pressing forward, dozens of massive forms charging at the eclipse with hunger so deep the nebula itself shook in terror. The eclipse turned toward them again, red glow intensifying, preparing to unleash the final surge. Soren screamed, "No!" as his fleet pushed harder. The Orion's hand engines burned blue-hot, threatening to tear themselves apart. Human ships forced their way through collapsing layers of space, shields sparking and cracking under the pressure, but they didn't stop. Terrans never stopped. With a final burst, the Orion's hand pushed close enough for their override beacon to lock onto the eclipse's hull. The engineering officer's voice cracked in disbelief. We did it. We're connected." Soren breathed deeply, a broken, relieved exhale. Begin shutdown override. The crew acted fast, uploading ancient Terran codes older than modern Earth, codes preserved only for absolute emergencies. The eclipse resisted. Space cracked. The nebula screamed. The swarm roared closer. Soren whispered, almost pleading, "Please, trust us." For a long moment, nothing happened. The core glowed brighter, red light flooding the nebula like sunrise over a battlefield. And then, a single rune on the eclipse's hull turned blue. Then another. Then another. The red glow weakened. The overload slowed. The core stabilized. Terran crews gasped. The council cried in relief. Civilians cheered across worlds. Soren dropped to his knees, overwhelmed, whispering, "Thank you, thank you." But the moment of relief vanished instantly as the swarm changed direction, turning toward the Terran fleet. The Devourers had discovered something new, something dangerous, something they hated hope, and they charged forward like an ocean of darkness ready to consume both the eclipse and humanity. The eclipse's runes flared bright blue. Soren rose slowly, wiping his tears, eyes hardened with new fire. "Terran fleet," he said softly, "hold the line." And all across the galaxy, every being felt the storm of fate gathering as humanity prepared to stand between the swarm and the universe itself. Across the violent heart of the Kalari's nebula, where space twisted like wounded metal and storms burned with blue lightning that sliced through the darkness, the Terran fleet formed a wall in front of the eclipse, their battered ships holding position even as gravity waves cracked their hulls and radiation burned across their shields, each commander knowing they might not survive but refusing to move an inch, because behind them the ancient forbidden warship pulsed softly with blue light, its core no longer ready to explode but still unstable, like a giant trying to steady its own heartbeat. And in front of them, the Devourer swarm roared toward the fleet in a tidal wave of shadows, stretching across the nebula like a curtain of night swallowing everything, their tendrils whipping forward, their massive bodies twisting with hunger, each creature radiating an aura so cold and alien that even experienced soldiers felt fear claw at the inside of their chests. Yet not a single Terran ship broke formation. Admiral Soren Hale stood tall on the bridge of the Orion's hand, his voice steady and sharp even as sparks fell from collapsing panels. "Hold the line," he repeated, not shouting, not panicking, just steady and calm like a man who understood that courage wasn't about surviving but choosing to stand between darkness and the innocent. The first wave hit them. Tendrils slammed into shields with explosions of dark energy, shaking ships violently. Engines overloaded. Hulls cracked. Thousands of alarms screamed across the fleet. The nebula shook like something alive and afraid, yet the Terran ships answered with fire, their cannons blazing blue, red, white. Every kind of weapon humanity had ever invented firing non-stop into the approaching swarm. But the Devourers weren't like normal enemies, their bodies reforming from shadows, their wounds closing, their movements unstoppable. and soon they pushed so close that one massive devourer slammed into a Terran destroyer, crushing it like paper, the wreckage dissolving into sparks. The crew watching screamed. Council members cried across distant worlds. Even Soren flinched but didn't break. He clenched the railing and shouted, "Fall back in tight formation. Push them toward the eclipse." Because he knew something the council didn't, the eclipse wasn't weakened. It was calculating, watching, waiting. The ancient warship's runes glowed brighter as the swarm closed in, shifting from calm blue to sharp, fierce white, like the rising flame of a warrior finally remembering their purpose. Terran ships tightened formation, engines burning bright as they moved with practiced precision, using themselves as bait, pulling the massive swarm closer and closer toward the eclipse, even as more ships fell, even as officers cried out in pain, even as families across the galaxy watched in horror. "Admiral," the communication officer whispered, tears streaming down her face, "we're losing too many." But Soren shook his head slowly. "If we fail here, we lose the galaxy." The crew didn't argue. They fought harder. The swarm roared again as if sensing the trap, but the nebula itself began to vibrate. Only this time the vibration came not from the devourers, but from the eclipse. The ancient warship straightened slowly, its core stabilizing, its runes glowing brighter than ever before, each symbol roaring with light like a star preparing to go supernova but perfectly controlled. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The Terran fleet held the swarm in a tight arc. The devourers pushed harder, their hunger burning. The eclipse rose behind them like a massive shadow crowned in white light. And then, the eclipse spoke for the final time. Execution protocol, engaged. The nebula exploded with light. A wave of white fire burst outward from the eclipse, not chaotic, not uncontrolled, but precise, cutting through the devourer swarm like a blade forged from the heart of a sun. Every creature caught in the wave evaporated instantly. No shadows reforming. No healing. No resistance. They simply vanished into pure, silent dust. The wave continued expanding across the battlefield, slicing through each massive devourer body until the entire swarm disintegrated into glowing blue particles that drifted through space like snow in a winter storm. Terran ships shook violently from the force, shields failing, engines stuttering, but somehow, miraculously, they held together. The nebula fell silent. The last echo of the devourer's hunger faded into nothing. And for the first time in thousands of years, the galaxy was safe. On every world, people cried, some in fear, some in relief, some simply because they had never seen anything so terrifying and beautiful in their lives. On the Orion's hand, Admiral Soren sank into his chair, exhaustion breaking through his stern expression as he whispered, "Thank you, Eclipse." The ancient warship dimmed slowly, its white glow fading to gentle blue, its runes quieting, its hull cooling like a warrior finally laying down their sword after a long battle. It drifted back into the nebula's calm center, silent and still, watching over the battlefield it saved. Council ships approached carefully, afraid, uncertain, humbled. And across the galaxy, species that once laughed at humans now whispered in awe, "The humans built that, to save us." On Earth, millions knelt in silence as Terran High Command broadcast the message, "The eclipse has returned to rest. The devourers are gone. Humanity stands watch." And for the first time in galactic history, an entire galaxy spoke one truth together. When humanity builds something powerful, it is not for conquest, not for pride, not for fear, but for the day the universe needs saving. The eclipse dimmed further, becoming one with the nebula's soft blue glow. And the galaxy held its breath, knowing one thing with absolute certainty. If the eclipse ever awakens again, the universe will need heroes, not armies. And humanity will be ready.